YouTube here today to show you guys how to install an HKS or any other SSQV or a blow-off valve onto the Fiat 500 Abarth. I'm going to take a couple things off. For me in this install, I installed it closest to the throttle body. Tried not to cut too much stuff. The original way that is according to Madness 500 is cutting it, I believe, off of the turbo intercooler piping. That's where you fit it in on. They cut theirs when they did it right below the turbo, which I was gonna go with that type of method. I just didn't have because I did this install before I did the big turbo, so I just wasn't sure if the piping was gonna change or anything like that. So I kept it as in the best location I thought possible with the setup that I was going to run. So, I mean, there's a couple different ways to do it. I've even seen some people do it to where they actually put it on the intercooler piping down here that goes around and then up to the throttle body, which, I mean, that method works as well. I like having my blow-off valve kind of hidden in a sense. It's still loud. You know, you get up in the higher levels of boost, like 25 PSI, and it's super loud. It's great. Yeah, I haven't changed my filter out yet, but I'm actually really enjoying this open one right now. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and take apart the battery real quick, pull this out, well, not take it apart, but pull the battery out, move this cold air intake, I guess line or whatever you want to call it, that goes to the cold air intake, feeds cold air in through. I don't need to explain the Eurocompulsion V1 to V4.1 to people because they already know what it is. Basically this just pulls in cold air. So I'm going to move that, take that off, pull the battery off, and then once I get to that stage, I'll break it down for you guys on how I installed it and what I did to get it to where it is today, and I'll show you guys about the vacuum manifold and how that works. Alright guys, hold on. Alright guys, so now that the battery is pulled out, lift that to the side, get the battery down there. So first things first, I want to go over this vacuum manifold right down here. Let me zoom in right there. That is a vacuum manifold. You can't really tell too much. Just got it zip tied right here. Yeah, excuse these little things. I wasn't sure if I was gonna adjust it a little more. If not, I wasn't sure if it's gonna be a permanent spot. So how this works is it goes off of your vacuum pressure, which I tied into right here. This is gonna be the line you're gonna tap into to do your blow-off valve. We'll get to that in a second. For my car in specific, I needed a vacuum manifold just to run things a little more smoother, and having direct vacuum source instead of like having a ton of tap like T's and all that crazy stuff right here. It had just been nuts. So I'm just running it straight into here. It basically has 4 spots available. I mean 6 spots available. I'm using 3 of them. So the first one goes, this blue one right here at the end, goes straight to my stock boost solenoid, which is right here, which is not taken off the vehicle with my boost controller. These two work kind of together. In a sense, this still plugs into my intake. It's a little beat up, but still plugs into my intake. And that's where this blue line goes, this blue vacuum line goes to. And for this one, this goes into my boost sensor. It's part of my boost controller. It's a sensor unit right there, so it plugs in, so that's 2 out of 3 used. This one, the third one, I put it closest to the blow-off valve, because for me, in my opinion, a blow-off valve needs to have a dedicated line, which, I mean, in my opinion, it's still in a sense dedicated, but at the same time, it's shared. I think the vacuum pressure going through here, I did vacuum test it just to make sure there's no leaks or anything. The vacuum pressure going through here to me is more solid than having to tap in a couple lines and whatnot there. So that's how that goes. My boost controller now is, the setup has changed a little bit. So I was running into an issue where my turbo was not boosting, and it was kind of freaking me out. I wasn't sure if it was a boost controller or if there's a boost leak somewhere. So I pulled the boost controller off, checked for boost leaks, nothing. It was very weird. So then I ended up taking my downpipe off, which I switched my downpipe from a 2.25 from Road Race into a 3-inch catless from 500 Madness. So then Road Race, then Eurocompulsion helped me out with a new revised tune and whatnot. And so back on phase 3, I flashed back to phase 2 because I wasn't sure what the problem was. So what happened actually is my wastegate flapper snapped off, and so I wasn't able to boost. And it was driving me crazy. I wasn't sure what the problem was, and then I finally took that apart. So I had to pull the turbo off, and in the meantime, I actually was able to, I don't know if I can get enough light, but you can barely see it down there. I was able to actually get a line, which I didn't have before. I didn't have the line on the compressor housing. Now it's on the compressor housing, so now I'm getting more accurate boost readings than before. So now it's on the compressor housing and plugs right into my boost controller right there. And that is electronic boost controller by Greddy. It's a Profect, and it's great. Anyone that says that you guys have problems with a boost controller in this car, with the boost spikes or over boosting, not once, the way this is set up, have I ever ran a boost issue or had an issue or a code thrown at all. Never once did I have that problem. Now, would I say it's safe to run a boost controller? Yes and no. I think the way I tuned it very safely to where it's not like skyrocketing up to 30 plus PSI or something crazy like that. So the boost is set up a certain way that I personally like it. It just feeds right into the wastegate right there. So that's that line, and then obviously there's a little harness that it plugs into the sensor. The sensor goes to my dash where it's hooked up. But anyways, that's not the main concern of this video. The main concern is getting this HKS installed. Now, I'm not going to take it apart because I'm just going to give you guys a basic rundown on how it's installed. So it's down here. Let me get this, move this light real quick. So it's down here, as you can see. A little bit, put a napkin right here for now just to kind of prop it up for a second. But so this is the HKS right here. Like I said, I just did the setup, so I got to kind of cut some zip ties and whatnot. So it is a genuine HKS. I actually bought it off of Amazon for, I think it was like $250 or so. It's the SSQV, and it's a version 4. So how I installed it is, I'll put some links in the description. For me, this is how I personally did it. I do have Eurocompulsion's boost leak fix, or my own boost leak fix, I guess you should say. So I had to trim down this this charge pipe right here that goes to the throttle body right here, right here. And so it goes to the throttle body. I did have to cut it down a couple inches just to make it fit more snug, because it's how I put it in. It was a little too long, because what I did is I bought a flange it's basically intercooler piping, but it has a flange that didn't need to be welded on. It already came welded on. And you can find them. They have like 2.25s. They have 2.2, 2 inches and a quarter, and then they have all different sizes. I got, I believe it was a 2.5, I want to say, and that's where I ran into the issue. As you can see on this side, I'll try to move this so where you can see it. Right here is where it's mounted. It's mounted on that. You see the weld. And then I had to cut around this. This right here, this spot, that is all that's cut up is from another boot that I had to get like a adapter to go onto the original factory charge pipe. So that is an adapter. Like, I wouldn't really be cutting into stock piping, in my opinion, because you just don't know if you're going to end up keeping the, you know, whatever you're buying or whatnot. But I did actually have to cut into this one, which goes to the throttle body. So that is kind of permanent unless I buy another charge pipe piece, or probably have to find one from a junkyard or something. But that is kind of permanent for me. The reason why I went with a 2.5, I believe, I'd have to double check and put it in the description, but is that it goes into the intercooler piping that I already have, which is down here, which is the Silla Concepts intercooler. It already goes into it, so it fit nice and snug. Which the Silla Concepts intercooler piping actually runs with a stock charge pipe line, which is this one. It actually plugs right in there. So I basically just matched the size and bought a like a coupler or a silicone, like what do you call this? Like intercooler couplers or whatnot. Sorry guys, it's been late. I've been up all night. So basically just bought that and then put it in. And like I said, it's a dedicated vacuum source to an extent. I mean, like we discussed previously, it's kind of dedicated, it's kind of shared in a sense. But so is a manifold. So that's basically how I installed it. People can install it all different types of ways. like I said, mine's put into my vacuum manifold. Now, normally, if you didn't have the setup I did, you would actually just run this vacuum line, which is a 4mm vacuum hose. In case you guys are wondering, you can get them on Amazon for like 10 bucks for 5 feet. It's a 4mm high temperature silicone hose. That's what I would just type in. That's what I did. And it plugs in right here. So it's gonna plug in right, basically, there's this one right here. This line comes with a little like stopper or a vacuum end, similar to this one right here. This little nipple, it's kind of similar to that. You gotta kind of pry it and cut it off. Once you cut it off, it's gonna open up a vacuum port that's on the manifold. It's unused, so you'll just see it there. It kind of just pops out like a sore thumb. So you just cut that off, put this one on, and you'd run this hose to this line. The reason why I had issues with running the hose at the line is that this nipple is, I don't know the exact size of it. I know it does fit this 3/8 hose on it, which is hard because if you look at the blow-off valve, under here is where there's a little pipe that comes off the back of it. It's a little feed line in it, and it's super tiny. I mean, it's like the 4mm right here fits on it, but it kind of slides on. It's not like you have to push it on. So it's decently small. Like the 4mm is almost too big. So I can't see it possible running like a 3/8. You might be able to find some sort of reducer. But if it was me personally, like I did, I would just buy a vacuum manifold and just plug it into, because eventually you might have other things that you want to do with the car to where the vacuum manifold will pay itself off. Like for instance, I'm already using this line right here for my oil catch can, and this is a check valve in case anybody's wondering, by Boomba Racing. So that's a check valve, and that's already been used. So, I mean, there's really no other ports to put on anything for vacuum unless you start tapping and making T's, and then the more T's you have, the more room you have for boost leaks and whatnot. So that's why I just didn't recommend this vacuum manifold. It makes things a lot easier, and that's what I did, and that's what I personally recommend. And I mean, so far in the setup, how everything is, I haven't ran into any issues, knock on wood. And I want to go over the turbo real quick, since if you guys have any questions about the blow-off valve or whatnot, just let me know. It's a pretty straightforward install. You cut a spot in your intercooler. From what I was reading and from my knowledge, you want to keep it closest to the throttle body. So that's why I put mine closer to the throttle body without having to like. Because the problem is, you got this boost controller sensor right here. I'm sorry, not boost controller sensor. This is a boost sensor right here. That's kind of like a map sensor, just like you have the one up here. I know for sure that's a map sensor, the one back here. So you have that boost, you have that sensor right there, and you can't really just make your own pipe and put that on. I mean, you could if you have skills to weld and whatnot, but I just want to make it straightforward and easier to install without having to take, all different types of crazy steps. So I just cut into it and placed it right there. There is a C-clip that is kind of annoying. Some people say it's hard, some people say it's easy. It all depends on your skill level, but that C-clip, I do recommend getting some good clamps or, pliers, the C-clip pliers, to really be able to hold it down, because it is a very strong clip. I mean, it has to hold 30 plus PSI, so that's a very strong clip, and just be ready to kind of battle that one out. So as far as the turbo goes in this car, just a quick update. Everything's running great. Ever since it's been fixed. I did have it fixed locally instead of taking it someplace where it's originally from, which is from Canada. And Blast Performances, they were going to fix it right away as soon as possible. I just didn't really wanted it shipped. So I had a friend of mine locally, and he owns a shop in Van Nuys, California, called Turbo Performance, and his name's Bob, and this guy is freaking great. He's fixed all the issues I've had with the turbo as far as wastegate goes. Other than that, I have not had any issues, and I still highly recommend Blast Performance. They make some awesome turbos, and they're the way to go. But as far as like dealing with it locally, I just had my buddy do it, and it was great. And if you guys have any problems and you're in the area, Turbo Performance in Van Nuys, I'll leave a link with an email and a phone number for them, or their website, and they're great. Definitely check them out if you guys have any turbo problems. But yeah, so if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know.